What do you say, everybody? Chad with Casting and Cooking. Since we got the new Ascend H12, I figured what better chance to start setting up the old Future Beach Mariner and kind of do a run over of it, since soon everything's going to be yanked off of that one and put on the Ascend. Future Beach Mariner, of course, is Cassie's. We had two of them. Her mom got flooded out a couple of years ago, and they used our green kayak, just like this one, to rescue the mother-in-law out of her house, and then they just left it float and it was lost in the flood. So no big deal. We were down one kayak. We knew we were going to need another one. It just took a lot longer than I thought to get a hold of this one. So we're going to do a real quick run over of this guy, show you what I got going on. So ghetto project number one I had was to make this little, box slash rod holder slash crate slash, of course, personal cooler. So it sits up on top quite well. The thing that I like the most are my rod holders. My rod holders are not rod holders. They are drop drains for vanities. If you go into Lowe's or Home Depot in the plumbing section, you can find these. They're for the bottom of a drain. These are about $1.50 a piece, and they're the same size as a rod holder. To not use them seems silly to me. So I used 3 of them. The cooler, of course, is a double layer, double layer thick. So I just drilled through the outside, kind of hard to see, drilled through the very outside of the cooler, not through the next layer in. And then it took some fishing, but I finally got the zip ties through on all of them. And of course I got some carabiner rod holders in there, or rod clips, leashes I should say. A couple of leashes to hold everything in case it does flop. And then of course we have the Project Overkill light, which, keep in mind, this is at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I do believe, and it's still ridiculously bright. And my all-day power that I can run also under here, plug it into my power box and have all-day power for my camera as well. So you can see just a chintzy little wire that sticks up out of here. And now what I'll do is I'll disconnect this and get the cooler off, and I'll show you the battery box inside. So now with the cooler off, you can see my light wiring coming through, and here is the battery box. The only thing that we have is one power wire. I split off to it for constant power for the light as well, but I've also considered plugging the light into my switch, but too hard to get to the switch. So there's the battery box. There is a couple of videos of this on my channel if you'd like to check out the details of this guy. Super duper watertight, super duper awesome. I never worry about it. Inside, like I said, we got my wires, and then I just made this little foam thing. You can see how it sits. Let's see here how it's gonna sit. The bottom of the kayak is kind of humped, so that sits in relatively flat. The pull noodles keep it from going side to side, and then I got one in the back and one in the front, just hot glued down, and it keeps it from going front and back or side to side once there's weight in it. So that's how I assure that my battery does stay dry, and I also make sure that it doesn't flop around when I'm tugging this thing down to the water or whatever. So let's have a seat here. The Garmin Striker 4, awesome little kayak fish finder. This big giant cup holder was in there prior, so I took this guy out. This red piece, the base that it's on, is actually a little cutting board that I used for fishing, that I just decided to cut the size, put some screws in, run the wires through, and of course, let's see here, mount the base too. So, I mean, I was pretty impressed with it. Like, wow, that works out really well. It still moves, not that you need it to, but it still moves and adjust your angle. So now we're gonna try the hard part. The hard part is to see the transducer in there. So I'm going to try my best to get you in there. You can see we have the pile of wire right here, and then the big cluster bang up there is the duck putty with the transducer in it. The shooting through the hull seems to be working out. I have had a few issues with it starting to separate from the duck putty, and I've had to take this big bucket out, which I'll show you next. Take that big bucket out and reach up in there and push it back down into the duct putty, and then put my bucket back in. So prior, this was one piece. It sat in here, and it was super shallow. You know, it wasn't much deeper than that, so you could barely fit a cell phone or a wallet. So I just cut that whole thing out, and then I found a bucket that fit perfectly. And I did have it attached with 4 zip ties, but like I said, I was out on the water and had to cut them all off and reach in there and push down my transducer. Put it back on with 2. It holds just as well. It's really not holding much weight. I just keep a bunch of pointless junk in there right now. It's a lot more storage than I need, and since this kayak is going to go back to original form, I'm going to cut this bucket in about half and then put it back in here, so that way you can still access the whole front of the hull, because right now she sticks down pretty low. There's only about, I'd say 4 inches between the bottom of the kayak and the bottom of that bucket. And with my transducer wire right there, I can't even like shove a life jacket up there. So the other quick mod I did on this guy was these conduit straps. They were the heaviest, easiest way essentially for me to attach the handles, which this one just broke today, as I mentioned earlier. So we'll have to put some paracord in that guy, but it was the quickest way to attach a hook or something and know that it was stout. I also do have relatively large plates under here, so that way it's not just holding with the screws. There's a plate underneath of it. So strap her down to the roof and do 90 and not worry about this thing ripping off the top of the Jeep. So the old Future Beach, we're gonna miss you. And the final necessity mod that I had on this guy was an anchor trolley. Don't mind the 2019 sticker. I do have a new one, I swear. I've been checked by DNR. The anchor trolley system, she's gotten a little loose using it. We got one in the front, they meet in the middle here, and then we got one in the back. They've worked out fantastic. That was basically the first thing that I realized. You cannot fish in a kayak without an anchor trolley, because even the slightest little wind will push you a mile an hour down a shoreline. Anchor trolley. And before we're done with the Future Beach, I have to show you the absolute best modification that I've done to this. I've looked at Hobies, I've looked at Jacksons, I've looked at Feel Frees, I've looked at Vibes, I've looked at every other kayak company. I have never seen this modification, and it's the classiest. It's an amazing modification. The wine cork drain plug. Oh yeah, she works like a champ, and she's threaded way in there to make sure it's nice and waterproof. But the wine cork drain plug, I don't care if you go out and spend $5 grand on a Hobie tomorrow, you're not going to get that type of quality engineering. Future Beach Mariner, talk about entry-level kayak fishing, this is it. So me and the Future Beach are going to get to work. I'm going to yank this guy apart. All right, so I cut my bucket down to about only, it's about 3 inches, I think. 3.5 inches up the side of the bucket is what I measured all the way around. Cut her, got her all back attached. Got the front of the hull cleaned out. So now, back in its relatively stock form, minus anchor trolley still on the side. And a couple of carabiners that are still hooked up for dry boxes or whatever. Hook them up, slide them back into the back there. And then you can just grab your string, yank them right back out. Mr. Cuppy holder back in. And then of course we still have a little dry box in the back just in case. There you go. The future beach is officially retired from fishing. So pretty soon we'll be doing the, of course, the Garmin Striker 4 on the Scotty mount. It's gonna go on one of these tracks, I'm sure, on the side here. Run the wiring. I'm of course just gonna Gorilla Tape the wiring the same way I did in this one. It held up so well, why not use it again? So that's about it. We're gonna have a bunch of work to do on this dude, but it's gonna be fun, that's for sure. So plenty more coming on the Ascend. We'll see you soon, casting and cooking.